I'm working on a boss fighting bullet hell game, mainly inspired by Cuphead and Enter the Gungeon. For quite a while now, I've tried and failed to make a good top-down shooter, often experimenting with a bunch of random ideas that end up being boring. But I think I've gotten to grips with how to approach the development process, and I've got my sights set on making a bunch of boss battles for my game, because people only really want to fight bosses, right? None of these boring little teeny-weeny lads. So let's take a look at how some great games design their player movement in boss battles, then let's use this to make some fun bullet hell gameplay. Now, what's a shooter without some fancy movement? I don't want my character just sitting around. I want to be dodging bullets and dashing around like my life depends on it. So figuring out an interesting way for the player to dodge bullets was the first priority for me. Enter the Gungeon has a funky little mechanic called the dodge roll, which should sound familiar because it's used in a ton of games. Enter the Gungeon's devs even liked the mechanic so much that they named their studio after it. So in Enter the Gungeon, the dodge roll is a multi-purpose ability. It lets you move around faster, and it also provides temporary invincibility, so you can use it to jump over bullets or pits. However, this is at the cost of restricting the player's movement in a set direction for a short amount of time, so it punishes players who try to use it all willy-nilly without thinking about the bullet that's 3 feet in front of them. So for my game, I want my movement ability to have a clear trade-off, benefiting the player in tight situations, but punishing the player for using it badly. But I don't want to just make a dodge roll like dodge roll's dodge roll. I wanted something unique. So I really had to fire up my 3 little brain synapses to form an idea. So I started off with a basic ghost ability. You choose a location in a given range, then the player eases towards it with invincibility. And I hear you guys saying, okay, Cam, this is kinda lame. Just wait, I'm getting to the interesting parts. So, I made a bunch of iterations. I tried adding a small amount of player knockback and easing the player in. This was to polish the feeling of the movement, but the extra push just felt odd and unintended. I also tried having the player snap more into place, which felt nice and responsive. I initially thought that removing the knockback made using the ability much more clear to use, since you'll know exactly where you're going to end up. But after using the version with knockback for a bit, it felt like it had a lot more potential, so I really leaned into adding extra okay, not that much knockback. Alright, that's better. I think the best improvement I made was adding movement while ghosting, which felt very unique and it wasn't something I had seen before. This allows you to adjust your trajectory of your ghost to avoid running into bullets. The way ghosting works is the player is forced to a certain distance away from the goal. This distance decreases exponentially so the player moves towards the chosen position. The new additional movement allows the player to move around as normal while ghosting, but the player will still be forced to the same distances. For instance, if you hold the right button down while ghosting, the player will move to the right, and then the ghost behavior forces the player to a specific distance. This repeats until the player reaches the goal. The ghost ability works pretty well right now, but there's definitely more room to polish its behavior. The movement while ghosting felt too snappy, because you can go back and forth like pow 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 pow. I improved how this felt by reducing the movement strength while ghosting. This improves the visuals, as the movement flows a lot better. It also improves the gameplay, as there's more importance in choosing a good movement direction at the start of the ghosting. Another problem with the current system was that if you were moving to the right and you ghosted, the ghosting would push you in the opposite direction. I wasn't sure on how to fix this, and I wasn't even sure if it needed a fix, but after some testing, I realized I could just invert the player's movement when they're ghosting. Even though this is a super simple solution, it was quite difficult for me to come to this realization, since it's only obvious in hindsight. You now hold down the direction you want to dash after ghosting, instead of the direction you move during the first few frames of the ghost. This way you keep moving in the same direction that you were moving before you ghosted. At this point I really loved how this felt to use. I also added an extra mechanic which I call a saving grace, where you have a short period of time to ghost back onto the ground if you fall off the map. This gives the player another chance to save themselves if they are hit away from the ground. I only really added this because I thought it would feel cool, and it feels cool, so I'm obviously going to keep it. Overall, I'm surprised by how well the ghosting mechanic turned out. It's very simple, yet it has a lot of room to get super good at it. Much like the dodge roll, ghosting has multiple benefits, since it gives the player fast movement, invincibility frames, the saving grace when falling off the map, and it can even help you reach that like and subscribe button. Along with its benefits, it has a clear trade-off, as the knockback speed punishes you for ghosting towards more bullets. I'd end up finding myself just playing with the movement system, which is a good sign that other people will probably enjoy using it too. Alright, now that we got a fun movement ability, we need some boss attacks for the player to dodge. I always wondered how the maths were done for more complex bullet patterns, and for some reason I just always failed to consider that the bullets could be grouped together. This was a huge realization for me, which I used quite a bit in my boss's attacks. Now that I'm not restricted to plain old straight lines, rotations, and sine waves, we can do more crazy stuff like this and this. My initial plan for this circle attack was creating a group of bullets that kinda swayed in a natural and slightly hard to follow way. I also wanted the bullets to slightly rotate around the group origin, and slightly pulse in and out too. When I first tried making this attack, I coded it so the X velocity would be repeatedly set to a random value after a random amount of time. This movement was too inconsistent. It often led to the bullets floating off the stage or traveling too straight, and it didn't have the floatiness that I wanted. I attempted another approach where I made the group follow a sine wave with an increasing amplitude. Along with giving the bullet group a random horizontal speed and giving the individual bullets a sine wave movement, the end result was a naturally swaying bullet group that I was quite happy with. This swirly attack uses bullet groups too, although I think it's a lot less obvious. So I was messing around and experimenting with shooting these bullet pairs towards the player, and I noticed it looked really cool if the player ran around the enemy while the bullet pair rotated in the same direction. So I added this as a boss attack, but instead gave the bullets a constant rotation around the boss, instead of making the bullets point towards the player. The way this works is that the boss just shoots out two bullets that are grouped and rotating together, but when there's a lot of these, it has an interesting and kinda trippy sine wave effect. These attacks felt visually interesting and unique, so I'm glad I was able to make use of the grouped bullets. Giving the player the necessary information to avoid an attack makes the boss fights feel a lot more fair. In Cuphead, the bosses often warn the player of danger. They will wind up for a large attack. I similarly gave my enemy attacks a wind up. For example, the little minions pull their head back before they sneeze out bullets, and the boss tucks his arms in before shooting out bullets too. This gives the player time to react accordingly, which makes the game feel more fair. Cuphead bosses also indicate when they're going to move to a certain part of the stage, or if a part of the stage will become hazardous. Cuphead bosses definitely do this much more elegantly compared to my boss. I think I was a bit lazy. I would just plop a yellow rectangle or a yellow circle, whereas Cuphead uses proper boss animations which are much more immersive indicators. This is something I'm aiming to improve on in the next boss that I develop. Players will generally take advantage of the easiest strategies to play a game, even if they're the least fun. During my boss's second phase, I only wanted to draw down-facing sprites to save time, where the boss would remain facing down at the top of the arena. However, the arena was super big, so if the boss was at the top of the arena, the player would just spam bullets from very far away where it's safer, which is not fun and very boring, so we don't want any of that. So what would the sensible solution be? Maybe the boss attacks the back of the arena, or sometimes moves closer to the player? Well, I decided, why not just break off some of the arena? It forces you to stay closer to the boss while leaving enough space to dodge attacks. Another key focus when testing my bosses was ensuring that any lame Larrys couldn't just camp in a safe spot in the arena. For this circular attack, I noticed that these circles never reached the top left and top right corners of the arena, and I didn't want to change how these bullets moved, so I made the boss move towards you slightly, and I added extra bullets on the edges to avoid camping in safer spots. These blue bullets don't actually hurt the player, but they knock the player back and can't be ghosted through, which incentivizes staying near the center of the arena. It's more risky to stay near the edge because then you could be knocked into other bullets or pushed off the map. These solutions help to avoid boring player behaviors, so that Larry has to actually play my game the way it's intended. But yeah, overall I think the boss turned out great. It feels engaging because of the unique attack patterns, and because the player is forced to constantly avoid bullets. I'm also super happy with how the animations turned out, since they look visually interesting and also warn the player of an upcoming attack. I'm super happy with the progress so far with the player ghosting and the boss attacks I implemented. I'm definitely not finished yet though. I'm aiming to add at least 2 more bosses until the game is done. I'm trying to keep the scope small so that I'm more likely to finish the game. I've learned how helpful it can be to study the design patterns from very successful games, whether it's the trade-offs for dodge rolling in Enter the Gungeon, or the animations used to hint at attacks in Cuphead. Understanding these design choices definitely improved the quality of my own game. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much for watching till the end of the video. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed it. I'm very new to making videos, so I appreciate any positive or negative feedback that you might have. I'm still working on this game, so it's not available to play yet, but it will be free to play in the browser when it's done. Alright, thanks again for stopping by. I'll see you guys in the next video.